First came a dull thud no one on the surface took seriously. 2 minutes later, the Barents Sea jumped like something struck it from below. A second blast rolled across the fleet, rattled dishes in mess halls, and shoved a steel giant down into the mud. Radios lit up, alarms flashed, and then the sea went quiet again. On the seabed, the submarine Kursk settled nose first at 108 meters, her bow torn open and compartments twisted by heat and pressure. 118 men had gone to sea that morning. Not all of them would feel the second minute. The day had started as a show of strength. Dozens of ships were spread across gray water for torpedo drills. The Kursk was the pride, large, modern, built to take punishment. In her control room, the routine was unremarkable by design. Prepare a practice shot, confirm settings, call it out compartment by compartment. At 11:28, the first sound was small, like a door slammed underwater. Officers waited for the report that should have followed. It didn't. At 11:30, the second explosion tore through the forward section. A torpedo's high-test peroxide propellant had failed, burned far too hot, and the heat touched nearby warheads. The shock turned steel into shrapnel and men into statistics. Fires roared, water punched in, and the boat dropped to the bottom in seconds. Aft of the blast line, men slammed watertight doors and felt the dogs bite. They moved by touch and training through smoke and steam, shouting roll call in air that already stung their throats. In the 9th compartment, farthest back, they found a pocket where light and air still held. Lieutenant Captain Dmitry Kolesnikov pulled a pencil from his sleeve and wrote names as voices answered through coughing and the thud of boots. 23 alive. He noted the time and folded the paper into his pocket. Then they did what submariners do: improvise, conserve, and wait for the surface to come to them. Up above, the first explanations were easy. Communications must be down. She'll blow ballast and rise. A rescue ship was put on alert but stayed at the pier. Senior officers promised control and ordered patience. Hour after hour slid by while word reached shore that there had been an incident. Nothing more. In Murmansk, buses brought wives and parents to an auditorium where admirals spoke in careful phrases and said help was on the way. It was not moving fast enough. Below, the temperature fell. Condensation ran down bulkheads and pooled under boots. Smoke made eyes burn. The survivors killed the fires they could reach, then sat in their gear and listened. Someone hammered on the hull with a wrench. Short, sharp bursts. The pattern divers are trained to hear. On ships nearby, sonar rooms logged faint metallic tapping. It meant breath and hope, but not for long. Rescue finally started, slowly and with the wrong tools. The Navy's deep-diving bell was old. Winches stuck. A rubber seal meant to mate to the hatch would not sit. The sea rolled, the lip was burred, and silt fouled every attempt. Divers came up cursing the angle, the current, the cold that found fingers through gloves. Cameras were kept back. Offers from Norway, Britain, and the United States arrived by the hour. Modern submersibles, cutters, teams with experience at this depth. Moscow said no. Pride and secrecy weighed more than time. Inside, watches ticked and then stopped. Batteries faded. A chemical oxygen generator, a candle, flared and died, painting soot across the ceiling and leaving a bitter taste in the air. The men rationed light, rationed movement, rationed words. Kolesnikov pulled the note again and added detail. A man burned, another unconscious. The compartment cold and dark. "We will try to hold on," he wrote. Between rounds of tapping, they listened for an answer that didn't come. On shore, families were promised progress. Admirals pointed at charts and said divers were close. Reporters were kept outside fences and told to wait for statements. Television showed the same ships cutting the same gray water, while wives and parents tried to read truth in faces that wouldn't look up. Fear hardened into anger. Why weren't the foreign teams in the water? Why couldn't anyone make the bell hold to a hatch? Why were the answers so tidy when the sea never is? By the third day, diesel, smoke, and sweat had soaked into everything in the ninth compartment. Condensation dripped like rain. Men shared a last bottle and cracked more chemical air packs. They hissed weakly. Someone scratched a prayer into paint. Kolesnikov's pencil grew dull. The sentences at the bottom of the page were shorter. The tapping that had been logged with hope grew fainter, then stopped. At last, the government accepted help. Norwegian divers arrived with gear built for this work, and a plan that did not guess. They took their submersible down and found the hatch rim bent and packed with silt. They cut and brushed and cleared until a seal could hold. When they opened the outer door, there was no rush of trapped air, only cold, black water. Inside, bodies told the story in positions more clear than any report. Men clustered near the escape route, some still in gear, all past saving. The 23 who had survived the explosions had lasted as long as men can in darkness and thin air. Oxygen had finally run out. Hope had been allowed to run out with it. Russia grieved, then boiled. The official story could not be managed into comfort. The facts were too plain. The Kursk had been crippled by its own failed torpedo. Men had lived for hours and some for days. Help that might have reached them had been waved off until it was too late. In a hall full of families, senior officers were shouted down by mothers who wanted times and names, not words about honor. The president, silent in the early days, finally faced cameras and anger he could not deflect. This was no longer a naval accident. It was a national wound. Months later, cranes and barges lifted the wreck in a salvage job few had attempted at that scale. The shattered bow was too dangerous to move and left behind. On the deck of a heavy-lift barge, investigators walked torn passageways, photographed valves and wiring, and took samples. Lab work confirmed what blast patterns in the note had already suggested. A peroxide-fueled torpedo had leaked, the fuel ran away into heat, and warheads nearby cooked off. The first blast killed the men up front. The second sealed the rest into a tomb that would not open in time. Letters found in the ninth compartment were dried and logged and sent home in plain envelopes. Kolesnikov's note reached his widow. The pencil lines were still dark. There are 23 of us here. We are trying to save ourselves. It ended with a farewell pressed hard enough to bite the paper. Other scraps carried quick goodbyes, apologies, and prayers. They were the last words from below. The Barents closed again over the cut where the bow had been left. What remained of the hull went to port, was studied, and finally scrapped. Memorials rose in towns that had given sons to the boat, rows of names carved into stone, years that will never add up right. The fleet changed procedures and replaced weapons, or said it did. The families were left with anniversaries, with footage of news conferences, with a sound memory that does not fade, the hollow ring of steel on steel, the careful rhythm of trapped men asking for time. This story does not end with a hatch spinning in the last minute. It ends with divers opening a door and finding only water behind it, with a note pulled from a pocket in a dark compartment, with a line of faces on a wall. The Kursk had been built to fight and survive what an enemy might throw at her. She could not survive what neglect and delay took away. 118 went down. 23 lasted long enough to hope. None came home. And the sound that matters, after the blast and the silence, is the tapping that reached the surface and then faded away, too late for anyone to answer. Thank you for listening to The Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.